user principal names, and AD prep. In this nugget, we discuss the user principal names and the Active Directory preparation tool. First of all, the UPN is simply how the user can be identified in their logon, such that they can log on instead of just using their username by using something that looks a lot more like an email address. And there are different ways of configuring that and different purposes for it. We'll also take a look here at AD prep, which is necessary to configure existing domains to be able to accept Windows Server 2008 domain controllers and features. Did you ever wish that people would call you by a different name than the one you actually have? Perhaps you have one of those last names that's maybe a little embarrassing or sounds a little bit strange or something like that. I remember when I was in high school, I picked up a nickname. You see, I used to drive this 1972 Ford Pinto. Yes, those were the ones that got rear-ended and exploded on impact because of the gas tank rupturing. Fortunately, of course, that never happened to me. But anyway, people in high school used to call me AJ because I used to drive way too fast. So they nicknamed me after the famed race car driver A.J. Foyt. And then as I moved on into college, of course, the ladies, they used to call me, they used to call me that creepy guy. But anyway, sometimes you get called a different name than what your real name actually is. And of course, we can do that as well in Active Directory. And the way we can use those different names, of course, is through user principal names. Now, there are already user principal names that are hard-coded in when you create a user account. So, for example, as you can see here, I've run a script that creates a bunch of OUs and accounts just so that we have something to work with. And I've got building 2 user 01, okay, very generically named, of course. And on the account tab here, we see that their user logon name is exactly that, building 2 user 01. And then here's the user principal name part of it. It looks like an email address. It's followed by @ and then the name of the domain by default. Okay. Notice that if you have, you can have a drop-down list here where there are other ones involved there. We'll take a look at how to add other ones here in a moment. But anyway, that's the way it is by default. Okay. So I've got a user that should be able to log on like that, and let's go ahead and take a look at that. I'm going to go ahead and log on as that user. So I'm just going to log on here as, building 2 user 01 at nuggetlab.com. Okay, and of course I'm doing a remote desktop connection to log on here in this particular instance, but if we had logged on to a local workstation as well, we could just as easily again use the same kind of a username. So I've entered in the password here, and then we'll go ahead and log on. Okay, so we see that we're logging on just fine. We don't really need to get to the desktop and all of that, but you can see kind of how that works. Now I'm able to log on using that user principal name. Now, what's the advantage to using that user principal name? Well, there might not necessarily be any advantage. A lot of users just like to type in their username and then pick a drop-down list that has the domains in it and just pick one out for whatever their actual domain is. Other users might like to enter in their email address looking name anyway. Maybe they're accustomed to working with that, and so that's what they'd like to enter in. But this can also present a problem. For example, my own company ends in my Active Directory domain, ends in .local. The reason why I did that is because it's not possible to directly hack me against .local by name anyway. And the reason for that is because on the internet, .local is not supported. Only the commonly well-known suffixes are supported, like .com, .edu, .gov, .net, and so forth. In fact, my actual corporation on the internet is known as a .net, and in fact, my email address ends in .net. So if I were to log on initially with my username at accusource.net, then that would cause a problem, because I would not be able to log on to my Active Directory domain that way since it ends in .local. Now, however, what I could do is to adjust that, kind of trick Active Directory into allowing me to log on basically with my email address. Okay, and so we'll take a look at how that kind of thing can work. Also, it might be very useful for simplifying a child domain. And the way that might work is that we want to simplify the child domain. Let's take a look at an example. For example, here I've got DC Nugget 3. That's just another domain controller, but it's in a child domain of west.nuggetlab.com. So it's kind of not fair. Any of my users down here, if they wanted to log on with their user principal name, well, guess what they'd have to do? They would have to log on as, and I'm just going to find any user here. They would have to log on in this particular case as Bisbee user 01 at west.nuggetlab.com. Okay, so that's what they would have to be able to do. Whereas people in the parent domain further up the hierarchy, they wouldn't have to log on with that long name. Let's take a look at another example here. Here you can see I've got a single forest, 2 different namespaces, therefore it's 2 different trees, but we have a contiguous chain of trust all throughout here. Okay. Now, in nugalab.com, they're easy. You know, they don't have to type in that much. Down here, however, we see that we have got a child here and then another child here where we've got arizona.west.nugalab.com. And you can see here that these poor folks have to log on with a longer name. And by the way, I apologize for the big old gigantic head. I couldn't seem to enlarge the size of this font down here unless I would make the head huge. Also, by the way, notice how politically correct Microsoft is. They are oh so politically correct that they're even reluctant to create a figure here that is distinctly male nor female. This is taken directly from Microsoft. So it's just kind of this androgynous looking character. That's why I call it androgynoid at arizona.west.nugalab.com. And this person's unhappy that they have to type in all of this stuff when people up here only have to type in just a little bit. So they're very unhappy. And you can see there's the proof right there. Okay, so what can we do for this person? Well, we can go to administrative tools, and then we can go here to Active Directory, Domains, and Trusts. And then going into this, I can right-click here to choose Properties right at the top. Again, notice I didn't right-click the domain, I clicked right at the root of the node, and then I can enter in an alternative UPN suffix. Hey, if we're going to make this easy, why don't we make it real easy? So, for example, instead of even having the users up here type nugalab.com, because that's way too many characters, why don't we just have them type, you know, maybe our parent company is CBT Nuggets. So let's type in cbtn.com. Okay, cbtn.com. Wow, wouldn't that be nice? So the way we'll do that is we'll just do what I just showed you just a moment ago. We'll go here to the properties and we'll type in cbtn.com. Okay, and then we'll click on Add, and then click OK. Now, once I've done that, I can go back into any of my accounts. So, for example, here I would go into, well, just one of the accounts I've already worked with. How about let's do that. This building user here, if I go over to their building 2 user 01, if I go to their account, I still got at nugalab.com. And by the way, when I click this drop down, I might not immediately see cbtn.com. Sometimes you have to take a coffee break or something, and then when you come back, it kind of automatically appears. But oh, there it came up faster for me this time. So now I've got at cbtn.com, and I can click OK. And now if this user wants to log on, that's all I have to do. Type building 2 user 01 at cbtn.com, and any of the people throughout this entire forest hierarchy could do the same thing. Anybody over here could do the same thing. The only thing you got to look out for is that there's not also a user by the name of androgynoid over here, because if they're both trying to log on as androgynoid at cbtn.com, then that'll cause a problem. And of course, Active Directory will check for that, and it will not let you create additional accounts that have that same user principal name. And in fact, if I did have another user with that same name over in this side of things, it just wouldn't let me pick cbtn.com and click OK. But as you can see, this is going to make my users a whole lot easier. You know, now we can turn that frown upside down, and apparently we kind of just horribly disfigure this person. I'm not sure how happy they are after all, but anyway, you get the idea there. Now, the other thing there that I like to do, and this is what I did for my own company, is that I just created another. Let's go back over here. Another user principal name over here that just was the same as my email address. So I just named it, you know, whatever the name of your company is, .com, instead of company.local or company.corp or something like that. Now my users can log on with their actual email address, at least that's the way it appears in the UPN here, instead of having to remember, is it .com or is it .corp, or is it .com or is it .local? You know, all of those types of things. And as we can see, once again, our users are very happy about this as well. Boy, I got to tell you, this picture reminds me of what happens when I'm driving and my wife's trying to put her lipstick on. It's very hideous. No, I don't mean to say that my wife is hideous. She's really not that hideous, or not hideous at all. In fact, she's quite beautiful. She's at least like 30% more attractive than this picture, in fact. I kind of feel like I'm digging myself in a hole. Let's move right along and discuss another topic here called AD Prep. Now, what is the purpose of this? This is a tool that's located on the Windows Server 2008 DVD that's designed to update your Active Directory schema in an existing domain, such as Windows 2000 or Windows Server 2003, to be able to accept Windows Server 2008 domain controllers and the accompanying features of Windows Server 2008. So when you install your first Windows Server 2008 domain controller, even if it's in an existing domain, you'll first want to be able to run at least these first three commands. Actually, it would be best, but you must run the first two for sure. One of them is to prepare the forest. That's the Active Directory schema relating to forest objects. And then you would also run adprep /domain prep to prepare the domain objects. So let me go ahead and show you how that could be done. Here I've made a connection to another domain. I kind of running out of domains, so I just used a domain that I own. It's called hisearthmyworld.com. And here's a server on that. It's a domain controller, and it's, of course, as you can see, running Windows Server 2008. If I do a rather Windows Server 2003, then you can see that it's running in the older version. I'm sure you've all memorized that version, so let's do it this way. System info. How about that? So as I do system info, you'll see that it is running that edition somewhere in here. It says it. There it is. Windows Server 2003 right there. Okay. Now, how am I going to be able to make this work? Number one, the Microsoft instructions, if you read and believe those, which are normally very good, they say to copy this adprep folder to your desktop or some other place on your hard drive, and then be able to run the commands from there. The thing is, though, when you run adprep, you can run it right off the CD or the DVD, I guess it is. And then you can see what it has here is LDF files. These LDIF files, as we call them, have data containing information about the Active Directory update. So I'm going to run adprep /forest prep. Okay, and then I'm just going to go ahead and run that, and you'll see that it'll go ahead and work. And as I press enter here, we see that we get a warning, and that says that if I have Windows 2000 Active Directory domain controllers, they must be at least Service Pack 4 or later. That's not the case with me. So since they're already fine the way they are, it says type C and then press enter to continue. So that's what I'm going to do, press C and press enter. And we're going to see now that it's going to update my Active Directory forest to the proper version of the schema. Once that's done, then I'm going to repeat the command, except that I'm going to type adprep /domain prep, and then that will, of course, then prepare the domain. Now, while it's doing that, let me make some other notes here about forest prep. Okay, first of all, when you run this, you have to be a member of enterprise admins, and then you also have to be a member of schema admins, and a member of domain admins. And I'm just abbreviating, otherwise it's quite a lot to write. But enterprise admins, schema admins, domain admins. In other words, you have to have all the big shot groups there, okay? Then you must also perform that on the schema master. Now, if you don't know what your schema master is, you can always locate that by typing netdom query and then FSMO for flexible single master operations. And in this case, this is on my Windows Server 2008 domain, but it tells me the name of the role holder for all of those roles. Okay, so you do have to run that on your schema master as well, as I mentioned. Now, again, while I'm waiting for that to complete, let's go ahead and move on to domain prep. For domain prep, I have to be only a member of the domain admin security group, and I should perform this on my infrastructure master. So my infrastructure master. All right, and then let's go ahead and take a look at where we're at here. Okay, looks like it's still working on that, so we'll come back to that in a moment. All right, the forest prep completed, so now I'm going to run adprep again /domain prep to prepare the domain, and then also I'm going to follow that with a /gp prep. Now, you don't have to do gp prep. This is simply going to enable resultant set of policy in planning mode, and this is going to it's going to change the access control entity permissions to give enterprise domain controllers read access permissions on your group policy objects, which is a lot of words to simply say that. It'll kind of turn on and enable resultant set of policy. RSOP is something that we'll talk about at a later point in time in a different nugget for this same series when we address group policy objects. Now I'm going to go ahead and press enter. Actually, I don't think it's going to work, so that's what I thought. We have to first of all go to the proper domain functional level. So let's go here to Administrative Tools, Active Directory. We could go to Users and Computers. Should work just fine as long as we can find the domain somewhere, like right there. And then we're going to go ahead and raise the domain functional level from Windows 2000 Mixed to at least 2000 native. I might as well go to Server 2003. And once I've raised it, then I should be able to run that same command over again, and it should work just fine. So we'll run this again now. And now notice that this didn't take anywhere near as long. The forest prep took several minutes. This one successfully updated the domain-wide and the GPO information. So we're ready to go. So we went ahead and did GP prep, and now let's go ahead and talk here about RODC prep. You don't have to run RODC prep. You can live your whole life and do your whole career under Windows Server 2008 and never run this unless you plan to implement read-only domain controllers, which is of course what RODC means. So this would be a very similar syntax. You just do the same basic thing here, and whoops, there we go. I guess I had too many up arrows, and I'll just run a RODC prep and press enter. And once again, there's not that much to that either. You just run it and it's okay. And then from this point forward, if I wanted to implement read-only domain controllers, then I could do so in this location. Well, I guess I better tell you this too, though. The RODC prep, you do have to perform that on the schema master. Okay, and when you do this, you have to be an enterprise admin, a schema admin, and a domain admin, just like the forest prep. Okay. And also, let me show you one other thing here. Let me open up a browser real quick. And I'll show you a tiny URL address that you can get if you want to look at some troubleshooting information and log information if you have trouble running any of those commands successfully. And so let's just go to http:// tinyurl.com/C39xt3. And this will, of course, redirect us, that's what tinyurl does, redirect us to the Active Directory Services team blog on troubleshooting AD prep errors. Okay? So just keep that in mind if you want to look for some more troubleshooting tips. In this nugget, we took a look at UPNs and AD prep. UPN, remember, is the user principal name, and it's the logon that looks a lot more like an email address, which you can modify in a number of different purposes. One of those is to shorten a child namespace into a shorter space so that it makes it easier for the user to log on. Or you can change it so that users can log on with what is their email address, for example. So different purposes for the user principal name, but again, just another way of logging on. And then there's also the Active Directory Preparation Tool, or AD Prep tool, which is located on the Windows Server 2008 DVD. This again will prepare the forest, the domain, group policy, and read-only domain controller capability within your Windows Server 2008 domains. Well, I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.